What's up, you beautiful bastards? It's Raziel here, and I think it's time to have a little discussion about endgame in Final Fantasy XIV, and especially the current massive healer problem, which then bleeds on down to ultimately endgame design as a whole. So let's just do the drop, and let me give you my 2 cents.
I am Raziel.
All right, so let me just start off with why I'm making this video in the first place. I haven't played Final Fantasy XIV for quite a while, but I have kept a pulse on the game. I'm always looking for it to improve. I cheer the game on. I really do want it to do well. I've had a lot of fun in that game until it ultimately died out for me, but there's a serious issue going on in the game, and it's something I've spoken about in my earlier video of why I quit Final Fantasy XIV. I glossed over it, didn't go into a lot of detail, but in this video I decided that I think I should, because it's very evident now, and a lot of people are starting to see it. At the end of the day, the baseline thing I want to say that encompasses everything is Final Fantasy XIV has very terrible endgame and encounter and job design. And I know right now, you know, the Church of Yoshi-p and all the weeaboo fanboys are gonna, you know, shit a brick and start sending me, you know, that newly developed, you know, virus in Boston my way. But I digress. Remember, if I say anything about the game, I ultimately want it to improve. And if you view it as a personal attack, then you should see a therapist to get some fucking help. Talking about a video game here, not about you. Moving on. So there's major issues in how all of these things are designed, and they've only gotten worse and more evident as time and expansions have gone on. And I think we're hitting a breaking point now. It's come to a head. So what are these problems? Well, before I get specific about the problems themselves in Final Fantasy XIV, which I will, I'm going to say that these problems are not unique to Final Fantasy XIV, not all of them anyway. These are problems that were introduced when MMOs started using the Holy Trinity as the standard tank, healer, DPS. Old school MMOs from way back in the day didn't use this design, so ultimately you didn't have this issue crop up, because every character you made in games like Dark Age of Camelot, Asheron's Call, EverQuest, Ultima Online, etc. All of these games, as the player, you were responsible for your build, and if you were smart in your build, you made ways that you could adapt. You could take damage, you could deal good damage, and you could heal yourself. So there wasn't a delicate balance of tank, healer, and DPS that needed to be maintained. But those are days long gone, so we're going to disregard that now, because obviously you can't tell Square Enix to redesign their entire game as a sandbox MMO. So I just wanted to point out that this problem didn't used to exist, and the theme park Holy Trinity style of an MMO is ultimately what caused design decisions to eventually lead us to this point. Though I think, and I'll get into examples, Final Fantasy XIV is an extreme outlier in this case, and I'll tell you why. So the big issue, and I'm not even going to talk about gear or about the rewards you get from content, because that's a whole other video and one I've done before, but in Final Fantasy XIV, healers, tanks, and DPS are just DPS. And this is just a fucking fact. They're DPS. Everyone's a DPS. The most important thing about every job in the game is how much DPS you do. And you can see it now. I've seen a lot of videos pop up on my feed, and I've watched them, and I've read some forums and threads to, you know, kind of put everything together, and it's exactly what I always knew was going to come together to a head like this at some point, is healers are now becoming scarce. Now, in any MMORPG, tanks and healers are always more rare than DPS are. Most people like to play DPS because, to be honest, for a lot of people, DPS has the least amount of pressure compared to tanks and healers, and they also have, generally speaking, funner rotations to use their abilities, right? And people love seeing big numbers pop up. There's nothing wrong with that. But there's even bigger issues in Final Fantasy XIV while healers are exceptionally rare and becoming more rare by the day. And that is 3 major reasons. One, a 1 to 2 button DPS class is boring as fuck. And again, go back to my earlier point. Every class in the game, every job in the game, is a DPS. It's DPS is what matters and everything. I'll get into why in a minute. But all the healers are 1 to 2 button. Their DPS rotations are 1 to 2 buttons, and they're and then we're going to go into point B here, which is tons of healing abilities. They all have tons of healing abilities, but they all serve the same purpose. And having a lot of abilities that allow you to heal in a game where healing doesn't matter is a problem. Now you say, hey Raz, what the fuck, man? What do you mean healing doesn't matter? Well, I'll tell you why. Because all the boss mechanics in Final Fantasy XIV, especially as you get into Savage mode, you know, the content that actually gives you gear, is pretty much a one-shot. If you do the mechanic wrong and you get hit by something you shouldn't, it's pretty much a one-shot. Health bars of your party in Final Fantasy XIV, generally speaking, are always in one of 3 states. Either completely full, nearly dead, as in you have a fraction of health left because you did the mechanic correctly, or you're dead. Those are the 3 states. There's very rarely circumstances where someone's at half health or, you know, 3/4 or 1/4 health. It happens, but it's exceptionally rare. So healing constantly, keeping your eyes on the bars and healing, is not something you really need to do as a healer in Final Fantasy XIV. You memorize every raid encounter, which is another reason I quit. All the raid encounters are essentially just dances you memorize, and then once you learn them and the timings and execute it perfectly, you can't fail. But the fact that you only have to heal, you know what times you have to heal at, what times in the fight you have to heal, because a boss does a mechanic that gets everybody really low, then you do something to get everyone really high again. The third point, point C, is that healers are all basically the exact same job. And I'm seeing this happen a lot more too with tanks, where all the tanks feel and play mostly the same, and everything's homogenized, and essentially becoming more so. I mean, Final Fantasy XIV has never been a game where you actually had any semblance of character building, any semblance of, you know, character builds or talents or specializations or anything of that nature. They're all essentially, every Dark Knight, for example, is the same as almost as every other Dark Knight. Every samurai is the same as every other samurai. But it's gone even worse than, you know, 2 different players playing the same job being the same. Now it's, you know, scholars play the same as white mages play the same as, you know, sage, whatever. And it's becoming more so with the healers and tank jobs especially. This is a huge problem. Now, the reason why DPS is all that matters is because the way the encounters are designed, as I said earlier, is there are a lot of, almost every mechanic in the game will one-shot you if you get hit by something you shouldn't, and if you get hit by something you should, will take you down really low, you get healed up. You know, a tank will use an immunity, for example, like Living Dead on Dark Knight, and you throw out a benediction, and you're good. But healers have to DPS. If your healers are not DPSing well, or your tanks are not DPSing well, you will not hit enrage timers. You will fail. You will wipe, which is very, very, very fucking stupid, in my opinion. Very detrimental to the game. People rolled healers not to DPS. People rolled tanks because they didn't want to DPS. They wanted to take damage, be good at mitigating damage. Healers want to be good at keeping the party healthy. However, there is no keeping the party healthy. It's everyone's low, get them to max. Everyone's low, get them to max on a set timer. And you can see this in almost every Savage and Ultimate fight that's in the game and has ever been in the game. So the strategy for every boss ultimately becomes memorize the fight and beat the enraged timer, prevent the boss from doing his berserk. And so therefore DPS is insanely important. Everyone is a DPS. But what if the DPS you play is a 1-2 button boring ass piece of shit like most healers are? People are gonna not want to do that. People are not gonna want to play that. Or if, a healer or a tank gets berated for them being the cause that the enrage timer wasn't hit, that doesn't sound very fun either, especially since you picked a job that your DPS, you weren't focused on DPS. And it doesn't help also that as you level up in Final Fantasy XIV, as the game is taught to you, through various encounters and various things, this isn't something that the game emphasizes as being of the utmost importance, the most important thing in the game. It very much tries to sell you that tanks are supposed to tank and mitigate damage, and healers are supposed to keep their party alive, as you would see in any other game with the Holy Trinity. But this is a very huge problem. It's a design flaw at its very core, and it's going to be difficult to see what, Square Enix can do to solve this issue. And again, I hate making this like Final Fantasy versus WoW or Final Fantasy versus any other game, but I'm going to use examples of how this is not present in other Holy Trinity games. And since I play World of Warcraft, I was going to show this as an example. So for this exact same problem, even though World of Warcraft has, tanks, healer, DPS, same as Final Fantasy XIV does, the problem of healers and tanks DPS mattering just as much, if not more, than DPS's numbers does not exist. Because mechanics in that fight, even on the hardest difficulty Mythic, don't always one-shot you. In World of Warcraft, raids, your health is always fluctuating as a DPS or a tank. Or a healer. You're always fluctuating because mechanics come in that don't one-shot you, and they're designed to slowly build up. If you don't, keep it under control, you will die. If you make a mistake, it's not going to insta-gib you, even on the hardest difficulty in every situation. And so healing is very important. Having good healers that have high healing numbers is very important. Sure, a tank and a healer's DPS does matter to some degree, but not even half as much, not even a quarter as much as the DPS matters in Final Fantasy XIV's endgame content. The only content in World of Warcraft where a tank and healer's DPS matters a bit more than it should, in my opinion, is in Mythic Plus, because you're against a timer and DPS matters much more there, which I think is bad too. I don't think a tank or a healer's DPS should ever matter as much as a DPS, but that's the only place in World of Warcraft where that problem's kind of approaching. It's still nowhere near as egregious as it is in 14, but it's there. But as a raid leader for many, many years in World of Warcraft, you would go back to logs if you wiped on a boss you're progressing on, and you could look where people were taking unnecessary damage, because you couldn't always see that. Like if there was a healing problem in your raid, it wasn't as simple as just, looking at numbers right there at face value on your logs. You'd have to actually go into World of Logs and look at, our raid, half of our raid is taking way too much damage from this mechanic that's avoidable. In Final Fantasy XIV, you don't need that. You don't need to look at logs, because how you know if someone took damage that's unavoidable is they just fucking die instantly. You died to that. You took something you didn't need to take. Well, it was much more conspicuous in WoW because you could keep healers, their job is to heal, could keep people alive through a lot of mistakes. And you want to clean that shit up, so you go to the logs and tell which raiders in your group are taking mechanics and, causing too much stress on the healers. There's no such thing as too much stress on the healers in 14. You just die. You just fucking die if you take something you're not supposed to. Another great thing I'm going to say is 9 times out of 10, if you hit an enrage timer on a boss in World of Warcraft, it's because your DPS was not doing enough DPS. This is DPS's job to DPS. Sure, you pick up some slack as a tank or a healer here and there. Excuse me, but that will never be enough to just make you beat an encounter in most cases. It's a DPS problem, you talk to your DPS. While in Final Fantasy XIV, if you're wiping in because you're hitting an enrage on a boss, it's your tank's not doing enough DPS, or your healers aren't doing enough DPS, or your DPS are not doing enough DPS, or a combo of all of them. And that puts everyone, in my opinion, in Final Fantasy XIV in a very what's my DPS mindset, which I think is toxic for any fucking game. On top of the fact that 14 actively bans you if you're using things that track your DPS and someone reports you for it, it's really just making a cesspool of shit that a lot of people that I've talked to personally that quit 14 don't want to deal with. Because just as many, shitheads that play WoW, there's shitheads in 14 that are elitists, and their numbers are all that matter. And in a game where it's strongly encouraged, not just by players, but by the developers to push DPS all the time. In fact, the counters are designed in mind that the healers and tanks are going to be doing, maximizing their DPS, is not very healthy for the game, IMO. But in Final Fantasy XIV, this is a huge issue. What Square Enix yoshi-p can do to fix this, they could go several routes. They could just try to make... the easiest way to try to get people playing healers again would be to just simply make the DPS rotation of healers more interesting and less homogenized. That'd be the quick and easy route to go. Because quite frankly, I think the only thing that would fix it on a more permanent basis is completely redesigning the way they do in raids and encounters and the way healing works in general. But that's a huge undertaking. That's like multiple expansion level of undertaking, which obviously I don't have delusions of grandeur. They're not just going to come out and do that in a few patches in the middle of an expansion. But anyway, guys, in conclusion, this is what I wanted to talk to you about. Again, I know this is more of a floating head video, but I really just wanted to give my take on this, that it is a huge fucking issue. And to be honest, I think I left Final Fantasy XIV at the right time. And I've been playing World of Warcraft a lot more, and this is in no way saying, hey guys, quit 14, play WoW, because WoW just may not be for you. But Final Fantasy XIV provided me a lot of fun times. It's a good game, but it's got some major problems right now, and they're problems that, quite honestly, haven't existed in WoW, and haven't existed in several other MMORPGs I've played either, that still use the Holy Trinity. I wish we could just go back to sandbox days and just get rid of theme park MMOs altogether. Personally, that's what I wish. But, beggars can't be choosers. Hopefully Ashes of Creation has something for us that's a bit more interesting, but I'm not holding my fucking breath for that. Anyway, guys, what are your thoughts? Leave them down below in the, under the video here. I read every single comment. Keep in mind, I am streaming still on Twitch every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. So just want to come down and hang out. We talk a lot about MMOs and design, not just WoW. But I mainly play MMOs on my streams, and I just love MMOs. That's what I like to talk about. And come in, and I'd love to hear opinions that are different than mine. I love listening to them. And you know what? Trolls are fun too. You want to come in and troll? That's fine too. Just don't forget to fuck yourself. And yeah, expect trolling back. Don't expect me to be a fucking white knight, because I'm not gonna. Also, as of now, the streams are on Twitch, but I may be shifting over to YouTube here soon permanently. I'm still debating throwing things back and forth. Obviously, if that happens, I will announce it here on my YouTube channel. But everybody, thank you so much for the support that I've received over the years. I really, really appreciate it. Hope to hear from you soon. Hope to read your comments. And as always, my friends, keep it real.